Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. You know, we have spent a lot of time in the last few months geeking out about Supreme Court cases and also examining many states' sour grape reaction to these rules of law. We see many states now trying to pass even more restrictive gun measures than the ones that the Supreme Court soundly rejected. And it has many of our viewers here asking the same question over and over and over. One that I think we probably ought to geek out about a little bit today and have a discussion. So today, let's spend a few minutes and talk about what happens when states knowingly pass unconstitutional laws. Okay, so the issue that we are talking about today is what happens when states knowingly pass unconstitutional laws. Oh my God, who would ever do that, right? Well, we don't have to go back too far in our time machine. In fact, we can do it in the last few weeks to see several examples. For example, Oregon Ballot Measure 114, Oregon's new gun control legislation, is absolutely the most horrific piece of gun legislation ever passed anywhere in the United States. Citizens are going to literally have to go get a hall pass from the governor before they can then go exercise a constitutional right. Their magazine ban is essentially an outright ban, basically turning people into criminals overnight. Oh, but you know what? Oregon is not alone in that, because you see, after New York State got smacked down by New York Pistol and Rifle Association v. Bruen, what did Governor Hochul do? Oh, she ran right back to Albany and they passed the Concealed Carry Improvement Act of 2022, which is actually just taken New York's very restrictive gun laws, which were struck down, and making them even more restrictive and more arbitrary, all knowing that it is in direct violation of the very court that smacked them down earlier in the summer. And then again, not to be outdone by the state of New York, well, then we have the state of New Jersey, because when the Bruen opinion came out, New Jersey had their concealed carry law struck down. They too have doubled down with Assembly number 4769, which just passed through their House today. This is a significant piece of gun control legislation. With all their new sensitive places in the state of New Jersey, there essentially nowhere now in the state of New Jersey where a person can lawfully arm themselves. So we have examples right now in the here and now of states that are knowingly passing unconstitutional laws. What then is the remedy? Can they actually do that? What effect does it have on it? And what is our remedy? Well, one of the things anytime I'm going to start getting into political issues, and we try to keep it here kind of apolitical at Washington Gun Law. We try to give it to you objectively so that you can decide for yourself what this all means. But occasionally it is nice to find the logic used by one side of a political issue and use that exact same logic against them, okay? And so when I started geeking out on this issue, like what can you do about state legislators that are knowingly passing unconstitutional laws, lo and behold, I came upon this really well-written law review article from the UC Davis Law Review Online. It's by a woman named Laura Bask. Her educational credentials are outstanding, Cornell and Harvard, so this is a well-educated person. And this is a really well-written law review journal about what can happen. Now, here's the thing. The political context in which Ms. Bask authored this, though, was in the late 2010s, 2017, 2018, 2019, where we were seeing a lot of states who were claiming that Roe v. Wade was wrongfully decided, and they were trying to pass heartbeat bills and various other very restrictive measures on a woman's right to choose. In some instances, having regulations where a woman could not get an abortion after certain weeks or at certain events. And each and every time, Ms. Bask here argued that those state legislators were actually knowingly passing laws that they knew to be unconstitutional. Now, with the clarity of hindsight, we realize that perhaps some of those state legislators may have been correct about the state of Roe v. Wade. But let's take a look at the analogy that she used, the remedies that she talked about, the problems that she does, because the problem is exactly the same here. It may be going in a politically different direction, But the problem of state legislators essentially thumbing their nose at the United States Supreme Court or at the United States Constitution is a problem that persists in the country today and is only getting worse. Okay, so the first question everyone asks is, hey, can a state legislator actually do that? Well, according to this article, no, they really can't. You see, almost in all instances, state legislators, when they are sworn into office, are sworn to uphold both the United States Constitution as well as their state constitution. Now, for example, there are some states, apparently, that do not require that. And then there is one state, Georgia, kudos for Georgia, where the state legislator, when sworn in, has to affirm that anything the state of Georgia does that is contrary to the United States Constitution, the state legislator shall defend the United States Constitution. But when we take a look at the entire structure of our federal government and the unique nature of how we created these independent sovereign states, but these states are not given as much sovereignty as some of them may think. I think this article correctly points out that no, state legislators simply cannot knowingly pass unconstitutional laws. Otherwise, our entire system of government breaks down. The author states, the question then becomes, what bearing, if any, clearly articulated Supreme Court constitutional precedent has on such legislatures' ability to pass laws to the contrary? Fundamental constitutional principles of federalism and judicial supremacy suggest that state legislatures are not empowered to pass laws contrary to Supreme Court precedent. The Supremacy Clause makes clear that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, trumping anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary. And of course, that is built into our constitutional structure as well, where the 10th Amendment says that all rights which are not vested in the federal government are then reserved to the state government. Let us also remember that there was a predecessor to our United States Constitution, and that was the Articles of Confederation. However, that, which had much more loose affiliation and no true supremacy in a federal government, created situations where we had contrary laws and we had many states that were not obeying Supreme Court precedent. And for that reason, the articles were withdrawn and the United States Constitution was created. Now, in addition to the problems of simply just overriding judicial supremacy and going against their oath of office, when we have states that are intentionally drafting unconstitutional laws, it undermines the entire nation's confidence in the judicial system. You see, there is a concept in American law, equal protection under the law. And what that means is that we are all to be treated equally, and the law is to be applied equally in all instances, in all areas. However, when we suddenly have constitutional protections, which are then willingly violated by state governments, we have an unequal application of the law. We have unequal opportunity. And for that reason, our entire system of government and justice begins to break down. It is hard enough to know the little nuances of every different state's laws on traffic, drinking and driving, firearms, and various other things. But can you imagine then if states were allowed to write laws also which were in violation of the Constitution and yet still allowed to stand? The third problem with any state legislature doing this is that unfortunately we know that the United States electorate is not the most particularly intelligent electorate on the globe. And for that reason, when we have attention drawn in state legislatures to issues that maybe on a national level are not critical issues on a national level, it will mislead voters, it will dilute other more legitimate issues, and it creates even a less informed electorate. And then finally, and this is a big deal, is how many millions of taxpayer dollars gets wasted every single year with attorney generals and governors fighting like hell to try to save their laws that they knew were unconstitutional at the drafting. Take a look at how the state of California still fights like holy hell on their AR ban and their magazine ban, knowing that the Bruen opinion clearly makes those laws unconstitutional. How many other pieces of unconstitutional gun legislation has been thrown out in the last few years at the expense of taxpayer dollars? Many of those expenses could have been avoided by the drafters of that legislation just simply reading the Constitution and the applicable case law. So then, of course, the big problem is what can we do about it, right? For every legal issue, there needs to be a remedy. Well, as much as we would love to think that we could put these people on trial for treason, no, that is actually not the case. You see, that pesky little 11th Amendment actually says that when people are operating in their official capacities, they are basically given constitutional immunity. We cannot sue them for what they have done in their official capacities. If we could sue state legislators, if we could sue United States Congress people, there would be a need for many, many more lawyers in this country. So the 11th Amendment keeps us from going after them on an individual liability basis. Now, one of the ways that we can try to fight what we believe to be unconstitutional legislation is through appropriations. Many states, Oregon, for example, they will pass these grandiose plans. We're going to do this and this and this and this, but they will never come up with a way to fund it. And that usually requires separate bills, typically called appropriations bills. And a lot of times you will have many different pieces of legislation attached on one appropriations bill. And if you have some people in your state legislature that can fight like hell on the appropriations, the best well-intended law in the world won't get anywhere unless it has the funding to implement it. And so many pieces of legislation can be killed through appropriations. But the ultimate way that you could actually hold the people accountable for knowingly and willingly passing unconstitutional laws, well, that comes on a Tuesday in November, because we have to vote. We have to get out there and vote. And what I hope the lawful and responsible gun owners around the United States are beginning to realize is that why we so frequently worry about our rights being taken from us from the top down, that the Biden administration and the ATF are going to be the ones that ultimately get all of our rights. We oftentimes turn a blind eye to the fact that many of our rights are eroded from the bottom up. It comes from your local legislatures. It comes from your school districts. It comes from your zoning commissions. That's when many of our rights actually are taken from us. So the bottom line is, as you sit there over this holiday weekend and enjoy time with your family, realize that yes, we have states in this union that still willingly and knowingly write unconstitutional laws. We as Americans have very little that we can do about that, but there is that one great opportunity, that one ultimate act of freedom and liberty that we all can enjoy and we all must exercise, and that is our right to vote. Listen, you may have more questions about this issue or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights, and if you do, remember, you can always contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now, let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.